Hello everyone, welcome to Caroline Nutrition. This is episode 6, Sleep. It's more than just rest. I'm your host Ian Cath, and I'm the one with the interesting questions to help us have the best that food has to give, health, vitality and enjoyment. And to help me make some sense of all the information out there, I'm joined with Caroline Scott, nutritionist and dietitian, and the person to answer your questions. Hello Caroline, how are things? Now that we're back into it again.
Oh, the things are cool. Are you suggesting we weren't?
Well, we haven't been into it recently, but we're doing an episode today. Yeah, we have, haven't we? We're doing an episode today all about something that a lot of us don't get much of in our life, and that is sleep.
Yes.
But we're going to talk a little bit more than about it in regards to the fact that it's more than just rest.
Yes.
We get tired, we want to have a sleep, but there's a lot of other things going on. That's what we'll dig into, because maybe you know a few things. It's not really nutrition, but maybe it is.
Yes and no. Yes, like everything, it always comes down to our biology and our biochemistry. So you might not equate it with the food on your plate, but we're going to change that for you today.
So let's get started with maybe the single most fundamental question. Why do we sleep?
Why do we sleep? Well, don't know about you, but I get a bit tired and my eyes want to close and suddenly I find myself falling down asleep. Why do we sleep? In terms of the human organism is designed to sleep for a certain amount of hours overnight. Like all animals, birds, little organisms, we all need sleep.
Even bacteria, I've heard.
Oh, I don't know about them.
Yes, gets rest. Or maybe not bacteria, maybe things like single-cell organisms like amoebas. But yeah.
God, how can you tell if an amoeba is asleep?
Because they don't do anything. They become stationary.
Have you ever seen an amoeba in a test tube?
No.
They don't do anything anyway. Jeez.
They do eat and consume. But yeah, they're supposedly those little critters have rest also.
Sleep. I think that's very questionable. But anyway, human beings need sleep like animals, and we need to sleep overnight. And we have a much bigger connection than we would like to think about, I think, sometimes, in terms of sleeping with all of the cycles around us, whether that's the sun, the moon, the seasons, etc. So sleep, the most important thing about sleep is it's a bit like our computer. We need to reboot the computer every so often, and sleep is a bit the same. So sleep is when we get to reset everything. And we actually have to be asleep for everything to be reset. So
what's resetting? Is it just the cells of our body getting a bit of refreshment so that they can move around for us tomorrow, or is it deeper than that?
It's deeper than that, but essentially that's part of it as well, but it's much deeper than that. So I like to, there's a couple of analogies I use with people when I'm talking to them about sleep. And one of them is like the computer. So it's like turning off the computer at the end of every day and then firing it up again the next time you want to use it. And quite often all the updates have happened, at least mine does. You get all the updates and you haven't had to sit through all the boring stuff. It just happens as you turn your computer on the next day and off we go again. The other analogy I like to use is it's a bit like when you're asleep, it's a bit like having a boardroom meeting. So all of the things that happen when we're actually sleeping at night, it's a bit like all of our things get together. The liver gets together with the kidneys and gets together with our adrenal glands and our thyroid, and they all have a bit of a big old chat and a powwow and try to break down everything that's been going on at night. So one of the most important things that happens for us is all of our detox processing happens at night. So when we like to put ourselves on these detox diets and detox packages, in actual fact, all the hardcore detox is happening at night when we're asleep. Not even when we're just resting during the day, but when we have to be asleep for the detox to happen. So we have to have melatonin, which is our sleep hormone. We have to have that high in the body in order for the liver to do a lot of its detoxing. The liver has two different ways of many different ways, but there are two major pathways that the liver detoxes, and part of the detox happens overnight when melatonin is present and you're setting off your phase 2 detox pathway.
Oh, so this is a completely different part of detoxing that your liver does during the day. It actually needs to be you need to be in a restful state for it to work.
You actually need to be asleep, not just in a restful state. So you actually need to be asleep for it to work. And so if you do not have enough melatonin present, it can't happen. So for a lot of people that suffer insomnia, or they're shift workers, night workers, and they don't have enough melatonin at some point when they are asleep, then this detox process doesn't happen effectively. And over time, whether that's months, years, or whatever, that will actually affect the health of the body overall. And one of the biggest things that you see are any of the kind of our disorders, I suppose, that are affected by detox. So for me, I commonly think people will gain weight when they don't detox properly and effectively. And you can have a lot of disordered bowel stuff going on too when you're not effectively detoxing. So it's actually not just about shutting our eyes and feeling rested by the next morning, but it's actually, there's a whole bunch of really important biochemical stuff going on overnight that we're not really necessarily aware of.
So people who push themselves, who think of sleep as being wasted time and lack of productivity, they're doing themselves a great disservice.
Oh, great disservice. And I hear that a lot today with people, yes, that are charging through life and they're trying to achieve, which is awesome, and particularly if that's what they want to do, but it really does come at a cost. There's like most things, there's a real consequence to our long-term health, and like most things, you won't notice it initially, and so a lot of people think they're getting away with it, but there'll be a consequence eventually when you're not allowing your body the opportunity to detox, to rest, to re-establish hormone levels, to balance things, to strengthen your bones. One of the other important things and interesting things is anything that you learn during the day, if you don't sleep well that night, you don't lay down the new memories. So if you're learning a new skill, or if you're trying to study for an exam the next day, or learning a new language, and if you've learned some new words or something, if you don't have a really good night's sleep where you sleep deeply for long enough, you actually won't embed those new memories. And I personally, I find that a little bit amazing. So sleep is actually it's a vital importance part of our health.
Well, I know from my experience, and I know it's a generalisation, but I've seen a lot of people who do shift work who seem to be pretty unhealthy and overweight. Is that, do you think, maybe because they're just not getting enough sleep, or at least it's broken sleep and all sorts of weird sleep cycles?
But certainly the research is showing that, yes, it can be a generalisation, can't it? It's almost stereotypical when we see it with our own eyes. But actually, if you look at the research, that is what it's indicating, that at the moment shift workers are suffering in terms of longevity of health, so they're actually not living as long. And yeah, they are more likely to be overweight and therefore be at risk of diabetes, heart disease, and all sorts of other lifestyle.
And as you're saying, a lot of this is driven from the melatonin, which is the sleep hormone.
Well, it is driven from them actually having very screwed up sleeping patterns. So because they're not sleeping at the right time, which is overnight, they're sleeping perhaps early morning or late afternoon, or even through the midday period. So they're actually going against their own hormones, and they're trying to turn their hormone cycles almost on their head. And it's just not healthy for the body to be doing that long term. We'll all get away with it for a short period of time, but long term it's not good for us to be doing that.
Yeah, our circadian rhythm is very much in line with the daylight hours, and melatonin's part of circadian rhythm.
That's right, exactly, and so is your cortisol. And we've discussed this before, and we'll discuss it again. I'm sure that cortisol is our stress hormone, and cortisol is really involved in actually packing on the weight if it's out of line.
Well, that's another hormone, isn't it? Cortisol. What other hormones are involved in all of this?
Well, there are a number, but the other ones that are mainly involved in sleep, so your melatonin, cortisol, and then you've got serotonin. So
I love serotonin. I love serotonin.
Stop it. I found a cafe in Melbourne called Serotonin. It's fantastic. Turmeric lattes. Don't get me distracted. So we were talking about serotonin and melatonin, and just very basely, I suppose, melatonin helps you sleep and serotonin helps you wake. So in the morning when the sun comes up, your melatonin is supposed to crash and your serotonin increases. And of course, there can, for a lot of people, another problem can be that they often wake feeling unrefreshed. And I always ask my clients that, because for me it's a great indicator that there's something not quite right in terms of the handover of their hormones, and that can be to do with cortisol. So in the morning when you first get up, if you're someone that doesn't feel you've got to hit the snooze button, and when you first wake up you're unrefreshed, you don't want to jump out of bed, you're okay after about half an hour, but it's that initial stage, then a really great tip is to get yourself out of bed and shine a really bright light in your eyes. Hopefully it's the sun. So you pull back the curtains and there's the sunshine and you get that in your face. Even if the sun's not actually directly shining at you, the light outside is brighter than any lights we can have in our house. And that light will directly kill the melatonin in the back of your retina, in your eyes, and that gives the serotonin a chance to take over. Therefore, a lot of people, if your cortisol has risen too early or too late, you don't get that effective handover, and so you can feel really groggy in the morning. And this is where a lot of people then will drag themselves around and feel like they're not worth talking to until they've had their first coffee or something. So you get into all sorts of bad habits, and a lot of it is that the hormones have not been reset effectively.
You know, back in 2008, when I was on my way to Europe, I remember very clearly flying over the Arab countries, and it was early morning, and dawn was just starting to happen. And I remember hearing about that, looking at the sunlight to help you rejig your body clock, actually. And I made a point of staring out the window as the sun was coming up over the horizon while we were flying at height, and hoping that would help sort out my body clock, the whole jet lag problem. And I think it did help a little bit, early morning sunlight. I think it did.
So what, you landed in Europe and you felt okay?
Well, I didn't feel as bad. I wasn't trashed, so maybe. Yeah.
I'll think of that next time. Thanks for that.
Study N1. There's a great deal of discussion, and I've met all sorts of people who need huge amounts of sleep and tiny little amounts of sleep, and people get into fights and scraps over it. But what do you think? What is the general rule of thumb? How much sleep do most people need?
Yeah, there is a lot of research, and the research is kind of mixed. I suppose the consensus seems to be that we're all individual, and we need to work out ourselves how much sleep our body needs. But I think in a way that's a dangerous proposition, because we are really tempted to fool ourselves constantly. So we know that there's a starting point. There's a point where we know less than, say, 6 hours a night can impact your health. So then it's kind of up for grabs, 6 hours plus a night. We know we can kind of say that. I guess there's always too much. Your whole body won't want to sleep over much. If you're allowing yourself to do a natural thing, your body won't want to be oversleeping, and so you will naturally wake. If you don't, then probably your cortisol is too low because you've been too exhausted for too long. So a lot of people that I see who have adrenal fatigue or thyroid disruption, they find waking is very difficult, and they feel that they could sleep all day. And that potentially is true because their other hormones and their other organs aren't working effectively, so their cortisol's not being supported. But all being fair, and you've got good cortisol levels at the right time of the day, so they're high in the morning and they're low in the evening, your body should wake up with the daylight quite naturally. And I'm sure if you really did your own experiment, you would find that if you didn't have the stress of an alarm to get you up or a job to go to, there'd be a natural time for you to wake and sleep. And quite often I'll suggest to clients, if they're trying to get into that natural swing of things, try and work out where that is in the evening and then in the morning. So if you work on, say we need, let's just take 8 hours, because that's often a figure that's bandied about, and that's not necessarily relevant for everyone. But if you think that you need 8 hours sleep, I know I do really well on 8 hours or even 8.5 hours. Anything less, and I don't function that well after a week of, say, 7 hours a night sleep. So let's say we go to bed at 10 o'clock. So 8 hours is 6 in the morning. Is that right? I'm really bad at maths. Yeah, that's about right.
That's right.
Yeah. So if you go to bed at 10 o'clock, are you waking naturally at 6? And if not, when exactly is your natural wake time? And quite often I'll find you might need to jig the evening sleep. So it means perhaps you need to try going to bed at, say, 9:45 or 9:30, and then see what time you naturally wake in the morning. Remember, please do this over your holidays or the weekend where you don't have to get up to go to work or something. So you're not complaining to me that I've made you late. But I think it's a really good experiment to do, because there will be, your body will naturally wake. It doesn't want to oversleep. That's not going to be that useful. But it will oversleep if you've got an underlying health problem. And that perhaps is a clue to you that there's something else going on. So the body is perhaps trying to spend extra time repairing.
So if you do want to sleep a lot, you've got a big chunk of time, you've got long service leave, so you've got weeks and weeks and weeks off, and you're just sleeping 10 hours, 12 hours every day, you could be playing catch up from a lifetime of not having enough rest.
Yeah.
So you've just got adrenal fatigue. You could be dealing with the fact that you've got skeletal muscular problems that are healing.
Your body is probably trying to heal, and you've probably been overstressed for an elongated period, and so your body's trying to heal. But there will be a point where it can no longer do it on its own, and so it's sending you almost into this comatose state in an attempt to heal you, and that's not necessarily healthy. You might need to get some extra help at that point and find a healthcare practitioner to help work with it. If you can test levels of cortisol, you can test levels of melatonin, and we can see, you can even go to a sleep clinic so that they can test these levels, so you can actually have a look and see what's going on for you personally. And I think that's a good idea to do that if you feel your sleeping is really disrupted.
So is there a general rule of thumb of the best time to sleep?
Well, we need to sleep when it's dark. So we're going to bed with the birds. That really is the most effective thing. So the earlier you go to bed, the better. But of course, that's really not what we want to hear. And my clients hate me saying this, because there's so many, myself included, we're such night owls. We like to sit up and we think we're so smart. We've got all this electricity and night lights. And we like to sit up and read or watch TV, or, the kids have gone to bed and this is the only time of the day that you get to yourself. And so people like to really string that out as much as they can. But sadly, the truth is that's really not helping us. So there definitely are sacrifices to be made there. And you really have to consider, why are you sitting up beyond a reasonable bedtime, which I have to say is probably about 9:30 is reasonable. Mind you, I'm listening to myself. I never go to bed at 9:30. But that's a reasonable time for your body. Particularly given our circadian rhythms, and then getting up at dawn, not before dawn, but at dawn, is also a natural thing. But again, not everyone fits completely this model. There are going to be, moderations around that, but not wild moderations. It should be close to. I know in my family from the UK, and remember, there are times of the year when you go to bed in the dark, you get up in the dark, you go to work in the dark and come home in the dark. There's a lot of dark going on, especially in the winter in the UK. But we would always wake up at about 6:45 in the morning, and that was our thing. It didn't really seem to matter what time we went to bed. It was always 6:45 in the morning. Now, I know that was because initially I was waking up to an alarm, but after that, I could wake up quite happily at that time, and that always feels comfortable for me. So if I have a job that demands me getting up earlier, I struggle with that, because my body seems to be set at this 6:45 where it likes to naturally wake and get up, and I feel really rested. And everyone will have a variation of that for themselves.
No, and I've also read that families inherently tend to genetically or culturally rise and go to bed at the same time. Larks and owls, the stereotypes of different types of people tend to follow family groups.
Yeah, and I think that's because of habit more than anything else, rather than a genetic link. It's more habitual. But
so if you're struggling to get enough sleep at night because of commitments, what about napping during the day, the whole siesta thing?
Look, again, the research that has been done around that, and there's some brilliant research on sleep, I have to say, does suggest that, having a bit of a nap during the day is not a bad thing, but it's often about the timing of the nap. So you really shouldn't nap for more than they say that the sweet spot is about 15-20 minutes. Any longer than that, and you may fall into too deep a pattern, and then when you wake up, you're actually going to feel really quite groggy. So, it's about that sweet spot. It might be great to have a nap if you can around midday or early evening, but the later you make your nap, the more that's actually going to upset you for when you go to bed later. So if you haven't napped before 6 p.m., I would suggest don't. You save yourself and get into bed earlier. But if you can nap around 4 o'clock or 12 o'clock if you're working from home, or 2 o'clock, that often, I have clients who they own their own business, and so they obviously work for themselves. And one particular guy, he's got a mattress set up in his office, and come 2 o'clock, where what he used to do would be to snack on foods to try and keep himself awake, or coffee, he actually has a power nap for 10 minutes in his office on the floor on his mattress, and then he's up again 10 minutes later and he feels great. This was one of his ways of losing weight, because he felt that he was eating his way through through the afternoon. So this really helped him to balance his blood sugars and all of his hormones, and it made him rested and then helped him sleep better at night. So if that's something that you can do and that appeals to you, give it a go and see if that really helps.
Yeah, I swear by it. When I was working for myself, I used to have a nap about 3 o'clock every day, and it was just brilliant, so refreshing, and then I'd charge back into the rest of the day and evening.
Yeah, and that if that works for you, that's great. It obviously it doesn't work for everyone, so just do what works for you. I think that's the best way to go. But there are lots of other things around sleep.
Some people have a great deal of trouble sleeping, so how can you help people to get some good sleep? And I know that's a pretty big topic.
It is really, and not sleeping, there's a whole category of the level of not sleeping. So is it, and if people come to me and one of their complaints is not sleeping, so I go through a whole barrage of questions. So can you get to sleep? Is it that you can't get to sleep, or you're taking longer than, say, 15, 20 minutes to get to sleep? Or are you sleeping as soon as your head hits the pillow, but you wake up later and then you can't get back to sleep? And those are actually two separate and very, very different issues. So if you can't get to sleep within 15, 20 minutes, that's more likely to be a hormonal disruption, in terms of it's potentially possible you've got high levels of cortisol in the evening. That could be from anxiety, stress, all sorts of things, and you're not increasing your melatonin effectively, so that you take yourself off to bed and you actually just can't sleep. You've got too high a level of cortisol, which is wakeful and stimulating, and you haven't got enough melatonin to override the cortisol or to drive it down to a point where your body can fall asleep. And that needs actually some serious kind of help to rearrange those things, but it also needs you to have a little look at your stress levels and your anxiety, and maybe look at what you're eating last thing at night. We really shouldn't be eating a heavy meal a couple of hours before we go to bed. And again, all these things, some people will say to me, I always eat dinner and then fall into bed and nothing disturbs me. Great, that's fine. If that's okay for you and you wake up refreshed the next morning and you have no issues, then fabulous, it's probably working. But for a lot of people, these are just things for you to have a look at if you're not sleeping really well. So sometimes it's okay to snack before bedtime, and for some people it's not. So for those people who wake up, who can get to sleep, but then they find themselves waking up. And oftentimes it's at exactly the same time, early morning. So I encourage people to check that. If you're waking up and you seem to wake up, 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock every single morning, I would suggest to you it's what you've been doing the night before. So it's either alcohol, you've been drinking alcohol, or it's heavy food and you've eaten too close to bedtime. Or the other thing is that you've eaten not a very balanced meal. So you haven't had enough, say, carbohydrate. And so you wake up because your blood sugar, your blood glucose levels have gone too low. And so your body has woken you up quite quickly, because that actually can be relatively dangerous for your body. So it will bring you back into consciousness so that you can actually release a whole bunch of glycogen from your liver, or you literally have to get yourself out of bed, pad down to the kitchen and have something to snack on. And if that's a case for you, then think about having a very light little snack based around carbohydrate just before you go to bed. And there was a great book written about this ages ago. Someone gave it to me, and you know what it's like, you briefly scan through the book and you go, I'm not really sure this really relates, so I put it back on the shelf. But I picked it up again the other day, and it's called Potatoes Not Prozac. And it's all about how and potato, of course, as we all know, being a high carbohydrate food, actually helps to increase your melatonin levels and helps to help release all your sleepy time hormones. So if you're someone who's waking and you can't work out why, try a little bit of carbohydrate. And I don't mean high sugar stuff, because that's going to be stimulating, but a carbohydrate little fix just before you go to sleep might actually be the perfect thing for you.
So something like crackers and cheese?
Look, I don't know. Cheese has actually got quite a reputation for helping to wake people up. So I wouldn't go cheese, I don't suppose.
So
but
a sandwich?
I think that would be a small sandwich, maybe half a sandwich or something. Yeah, could be good. Potato, sweet potato could be good. Something really light to snack on. I wouldn't go for a dessert or ice cream or fruit because I think that's too much. It's too much sugar. You want something that's going to give you a long burst of energy. So it's going to be a low burning fuel.
So a carbohydrate, but a dense.
Yeah, so it could be like almost like a black rice pudding kind of thing without a lot of sweet in it, or a quinoa pudding or something like that that's a little bit sweet but not overly sweet, that's just going to help to span out those blood sugar levels through the night. The worst thing is to have the crash and burn. And that's just an answer for some people. That's not going to apply to everybody. Generally what I find with my clients is that they've had 1 or 2 glasses of wine, particularly the girls. We love our wine in the evening, and we've had a glass of wine when we first get home, and then we might have a second with dinner, and if we had a really tough day we might have a third after dinner. Now we're not going to sleep. We're going to be waking up at 2 a.m, and the reason that's happening is because the liver is trying to detoxify the alcohol, and you're hitting that point at night where the liver's moved into its phase 2 pathway, its detox pathway. This is where, remember, we probably haven't talked about this, and we'll have to make sure we do in future, but the liver and your detox goes through 2 different sort of phases. So the first phase in the early part of the evening when you first go to bed is all about just breaking things down. So everything that you've broken down in your digestive system gets broken down to intermediary little metabolites, and they can actually be quite toxic. So the second part of the process, which is vitally important that you don't wake up before this happens, is that we take all those metabolites and we break them down even further, or we bind them to something that makes them safe. And then in the morning, forgive me for being a bit gross, but the first thing you do is pee or poo it out. Rather than storing it in the fat cells. So if you're drinking too much alcohol that your liver is getting a little bit overwhelmed, it can't break that down sufficiently, or, and this is where your nutrition comes into it, if you don't have enough of the B vitamins or minerals that you need to help your liver detox properly, again, you'll be finding yourself waking up because your liver just doesn't have it's not adequate. It doesn't have the nutrition there to help it. So you'll often end up storing this stuff as fat, if you can't eliminate it in the morning. And so for a lot of people as well with a really slow bowel movement, if you're not pooing every single day, then you're not getting rid of those toxins at night. And there's nowhere else to go except for the fat cells. And this is why we often put on weight without really realising or understanding why.
Okay, so it's good not to have too much grog before we go to bed, but are there actual foods and drinks that would improve our sleep?
Again, yeah, there are. And it's very individual. So for some people this will be useful, and for some people it's not. So, for a lot of people a herbal tea is really useful to help them sleep. Being hydrated, so with plenty of water, but obviously you don't want to drink plenty of water before you go to sleep because you'll be getting up in an hour's time, disrupting your sleep to have a wee. So you really need it. That's a habit you need to get into through the day so that as it comes to the night, you're already hydrated. So you need foods that are high in zinc, B vitamins, other minerals like magnesium and selenium, because all of these nutrients are really necessary to help us sleep. Now, these are found in, just whole foods, like really random nuts, seeds, meats, and fresh vegetables. All of these foods, if you're eating a good variety and a good selection of those on a daily basis, you should be getting enough of these nutrients. And these are the nutrients that the liver uses immediately to help create everything it needs so that it can go through its detoxing processes, and then it can help you sleep more effectively. But with a lack of, for example, and famously a lack of zinc, with a lack of zinc, we actually can't detox properly. With a lack of B vitamins, particularly thiamine, B1, you actually can't break down alcohol effectively. Without selenium, we don't sleep well and our thyroid doesn't operate properly. So therefore our metabolic processes and our weight management are really affected. So in a way, even though we think that sleep has nothing to do with nutrition, it does because of what's going on in the background when we're sleeping. And it really is, our body is always run on our nutrients. I mean, it's something that you always say, you eat something today, you make a meal of it today, and it becomes you tomorrow.
That's right.
So, and that's exactly the same overnight. Those foods that we take in during the day get broken down and metabolized and detoxed, and then they become us. So we really want to make sure we're considering what it is that we're putting into our bodies.
So you've mentioned that alcohol's not a good thing to have too much of before we go to sleep. Are there other things?
Oh, yeah, sorry, of course.
Avoid?
Yeah. Things that we should avoid, things like stimulants. So the obvious caffeine, sugar, cocoa. Always makes me laugh. People want to have a hot cup of cocoa, whereas they need to remember that the proper cacao is actually a stimulant and does contain some caffeine. It might be that the hot drinking cocoa that you buy from the shops is probably not good quality cacao, so it might not be as stimulating. But cacao is actually a stimulant. So I would be going for things like carob as a nighttime drink if you wanted that type of thing. I prefer herbal tea personally, but carob would be great if you wanted that kind of chocolatey sensation. But yeah, stay away from caffeine. So particularly coffee. I always say to people, caffeine's got about a shelf life of about 8 hours in your body. So if you want to have a good sleep from about 9 o'clock in the evening, you wouldn't be drinking coffee after 1 o'clock in the afternoon.
Yeah, I find that if I go near coffee at from about 3 o'clock onwards, I'm nailed that night. I've got real problems getting to sleep.
Yeah, a lot of people are affected. Some people will say to me they're not and they don't feel they are, but when you ask those same people the question, and how do you feel in the morning? Are you feeling really refreshed? Their answer generally is no. So they think they're sleeping well because they've got their eyes shut and their head's on the pillow, but they're not necessarily going through all the steps that their body needs to, particularly their liver and their detox, in the evening. And you don't necessarily know that. You don't know that for a long time, and that comes out as a symptom in your health. And longevity rather than a daily thing.
So the good old vodka and Red Bull pretty well nails it, doesn't it? The alcohol, caffeine and sugar all at once.
All at once, my goodness.
No way you're going to get to sleep if you have a few of those.
No, it's not. And if maybe you're a shift worker, and I used to know a few shift workers and they'd come into the herbal store. I used to work in Newcastle and that was the kind of stuff they were using. It was just amazing. But they needed it, they felt, to be able to work all night.
Yeah. So what should shift workers do to look after themselves? Because people
get another job.
Yeah,
no, sorry, I can't. That's terrible, isn't it? But
we need nurses overnight, don't we? Ambos.
Yeah. It's a really tricky situation. There's no two ways around it. It really affects your health in a bad way. What would be better for shift workers is that they stay as shift workers. The worst case scenario is where they do 2 nights on, 3 nights off, 4 nights on, 2 nights off, that type of thing. So your body is so stuffed about trying to catch up again, you're better off to stay as a shift worker and do that, say, for a block of time, and then allow the body, say, 6 weeks to recover. And I know that's not that we feel, oh God, that's not possible, and our work situation's not created to make that possible, but it needs to be for our long-term health. That's what it needs. So the research, and I'm not making this up, this is what the research is showing us. So if you're a shift worker and you're someone that wants to stay as a shift worker, then all you need to do is you need to come home during the day and you need to make your room as dark as possible. All those things that you would think about ordinarily if you're having trouble sleeping anyway. Take out all the electrical stuff out of your room. Keep it really quiet. Keep the temperature quite cool. Keep it really dark. You might need to wear earplugs, that kind of thing. You just need to block out all noise so that you can really encourage your body to be sleeping as restfully as possible. But you're better off to stay a shift worker for more than a week at a time than to interchange, nights on, nights off.
So really, in summing up, it's pretty simply that we need sleep. It's good, it's important, it helps our mental well-being, our body's regeneration and cleansing. It's incredibly valuable. You can't help not wanting to do it. So we should just make sure we get enough of it and try and get quality sleep.
Yes, good summary. I like it.
You like that?
Yes, I like that.
Okay.
It's great.
Well, we all know it's important because we feel like crap when we don't have enough sleep.
I know. Well, we just kid ourselves because we like to get lots more things done during the day. So we think that we can sacrifice our sleep and just do more things.
Well, I've noticed over the years, particularly in the last few years, that sleep is being recognised as being very, very important. When I was a kid and a young adult, people were saying, sleep's a waste of time. But now people are going, no, this is really important.
Well, I think there's been more research done, and there's more data and information has been collected to show and to prove. And there are so many sleep clinics, and that's just telling us that there are many people who have trouble and who struggle with sleep. And so, even just to make that improvement in their health, it makes them feel $1 million. I mean, just to remember yourself when you're on holiday generally and you've had some amazing few nights sleep, you just feel so regenerated. It's incredible. Yeah. So it is something that we tend to forget, and it's something I always talk about as a lifestyle thing. We need to get more sleep.
And one thing I've heard about is, and we haven't even touched on it, is the idea that you actually do a lot of cognitive subconscious processing overnight.
I mentioned that a tiny bit in terms of the memory.
Yeah, not just memory, but actually dealing with problem solving and resolution of issues that you might have during the day, and then you feel inspired. Yeah, the old sleep on it.
Yeah,
situation.
Absolutely.
And
the creativity. Yeah,
and the research is coming through that is incredibly powerful. And I find that good justification for people who like to get things done to encourage people to go and have a good night's rest, because they can solve some of their problems overnight.
Yeah. I agree. And often you wake up in the morning and things never seem quite so bad.
Well, that's great, Caroline. Thank you very much for a bit of information about sleep. Have you got a recipe for us today?
Well, what I just tend to suggest to people, look, their evening meals are usually fine. When you've got an evening meal based around some form of chicken or meat or fish, particularly fish, for all the beautiful fatty acids in the fish, and then a range of vegetables. Make them nice green veggies, some broccoli maybe, Brussels sprouts, whatever's seasonal. And then if you need a little bit of extra, a little bit of carbohydrate. I mean, you get the carbohydrate in vegetables as well, but there might be some root vegetables in there, some beetroot or sweet potato or parsnip, something like that. And often it's just the timing of that meal. Try not to overeat and just keep it nice and simple.
So it's the old eat whole foods yet again. A bit of protein.
It's the eat whole foods. You're
protein,
right.
Vegetables, and a little bit of carbohydrates. And I imagine steering clear of the sweet dessert before you go to bed would be a good thing.
I think that's, if you're going to eat dessert, and no one wants to be a party pooper, but if you're going to eat dessert, eat it with your dinner earlier in the evening so that you're less likely to get those sugar spikes that we talked about.
Whereas some people like to have their dinner and then an hour or two later they have their dessert and then they're off to bed half an hour after that.
Yeah, but and
that's not the way to do it.
I don't think that's a great idea at all, because then you're more likely to spike your sugar levels, which will affect your ability to get into good deep sleep.
Well, that's awesome.
Good, I'm glad you think so.
Yeah, okay. And I'd just like to thank you and everyone out there for being part of this little adventure. So in the meantime, everyone, there are some emails, some comments that you can send our way. Email can be sent to carolinenutrition.com, and that's always easy, isn't it? But if you want to try Twitter, Caroline's Twitter handle is @CJRScott, whereas mine is @IanCath, and Kath is spelt with a K. And I can't help but ask the obvious question, what's the next topic?
The next topic might actually spread over more than one podcast, but it's fats and oils.
Well, this is my idea, people. I asked for this one because I know there are a lot of people out there, myself included, who are confused about oils.
So we're talking about cooking with fats and oils. So it's not just, it's such a huge subject. We've got to cut it up somehow. But all right, let's talk about cooking with fats and oils. And we've actually had some feedback from some listeners. So we'll include that next time as well.
Okay. Thanks, everybody. And thanks for being out there. Catch you later. Bye-bye for now.
See you.